married for nearly 30 years. They had built a life together, raised 2 children, and gone through all the ups and downs that life had thrown at them. Now, in their early 50s, they were empty nesters, facing a new phase of life that neither had really prepared for. Mark, a former engineer, had recently retired. He had spent most of his life working long hours, providing for his family and ensuring financial stability. Now, with an abundance of free time, he found himself feeling lost. Linda, on the other hand, had spent years balancing her job as a teacher with being a mother. With the kids gone, she found a renewed sense of independence and wanted to explore life in ways she never had before. One evening, as they sat on their porch sipping tea, Linda spoke up. "Mark, I've been thinking a lot lately. I want to take a trip, just me, maybe to Italy or Spain. I've always dreamed of it, but life got in the way. Now, I finally have the chance." Mark was taken aback. They had always traveled together, as a family or as a couple. He had imagined spending retirement with Linda, exploring the world side by side. "Alone?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yes," Linda nodded. "I feel like I need this for myself. I love our life, but I need to rediscover who I am beyond being a wife and mother." A heavy silence fell between them. Mark felt a mix of emotions: confusion, sadness, and even a hint of jealousy. Why did she want to experience something without him? As the days passed, the tension between them grew. Mark felt like Linda was pulling away, while Linda felt like Mark didn't understand her need for self-discovery. Mark started filling his days with hobbies, golf, woodworking, and even trying out a painting class. But none of it seemed to give him the fulfillment he was looking for. Meanwhile, Linda had already started planning her solo trip. She was learning basic Italian, reading travel blogs, and making a list of places she wanted to visit. One evening, they attended a dinner party at a friend's house. As the group talked about retirement, hobbies, and travel, Linda excitedly shared her upcoming plans. "I think it's so important to keep growing, even at this stage of life," she said. "We shouldn't stop evolving just because we're older." Mark felt a pang in his chest. Was she implying that he was stuck, that he wasn't evolving? On the way home, he finally voiced his feelings. "Do you feel like I'm holding you back?" he asked quietly. Linda sighed, knowing this conversation was inevitable. "No, Mark. I just feel like we're in different places right now. You're searching for purpose after retiring, and I'm searching for a part of myself I feel I've neglected." "But why can't we do that together?" Mark asked. "Because sometimes growth needs to happen individually before it can happen together," she said softly. That night, Mark couldn't sleep. He kept replaying their conversation, trying to understand Linda's perspective. The truth was, he had spent so much of his life focused on providing for his family that he had never really thought about his own personal growth. What did he truly want from this stage of life? The next morning, instead of sulking, he decided to take action. He visited an old friend, Tom, who had retired a few years earlier and had taken up volunteering at a community center. "Retirement isn't just about filling your time," Tom said. "It's about finding something that makes you feel alive." Inspired, Mark started volunteering at a local engineering workshop for underprivileged youth, teaching them skills and mentoring them. For the first time in months, he felt a spark of purpose again. Meanwhile, Linda embarked on her solo journey to Italy. She explored ancient cities, met new people, and immersed herself in a culture she had always admired. and as much as she enjoyed her independence, she found herself missing Mark in ways she hadn't expected. One evening, she sat in a small cafe in Florence, sipping wine and watching couples walk by. She realized that her journey wasn't about leaving Mark behind. It was about rediscovering herself so she could return to him as a more fulfilled person. When Linda returned home, Mark was waiting for her at the airport. He hugged her tightly, and she could feel that something had changed, not just in herself, but in him as well. Over dinner, they shared their experiences. Linda told him about the breathtaking beauty of Tuscany, the food, and the people she had met. Mark told her about the young students he had been mentoring and how rewarding it was to see them learn. "I think I finally get it," Mark said. "We weren't growing apart. We were just growing in different directions for a while. But that doesn't mean we can't find our way back to each other." Linda smiled, reaching for his hand. "Exactly. And now we have new things to share, new experiences to bring into our marriage." They realized that love and marriage weren't about clinging to what was familiar. It was about allowing each other the space to evolve while still holding on to the core of their relationship. As they sat together, planning their next trip, this time together, they both knew that this new chapter of their marriage would be different, not because they had changed too much, but because they had learned how to embrace change without losing each other in the process. As their conversation continued, Mark hesitated before voicing something that had been weighing on his mind. "Linda, I have to admit, when you first said you wanted to take that trip alone, I was scared, not just because I didn't want to be alone, but because I wondered if it meant you were growing away from me." Linda squeezed his hand gently. "I understand, Mark. And to be honest, I was scared too. I didn't know what I would find on that trip. About myself, about our marriage. But the further I traveled, the more I realized that no matter where I went, my heart was still with you." Mark exhaled, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He realized that his fears weren't about Linda leaving him, but about his own insecurities. Had he done enough to keep their marriage fulfilling? Had he been too set in his ways? Linda smiled. "You know, maybe we needed this. Sometimes we get so used to being in a routine that we forget to check in with ourselves and with each other." Mark nodded. "Maybe it's time we start doing that more often." Their relationship was different now. It wasn't built on the same youthful passion they had in their 20s, nor the chaotic energy of raising a family. It was quieter, more intentional, and, ironically, more exciting in its own way. One evening, Linda surprised Mark with a cooking class. "You always said you wanted to learn how to make the perfect steak," she teased. "And you always wanted to try French pastries," he chuckled, looking at the course syllabus. As they stood side by side, flour dusting their hands, Mark realized something. Love at this stage of life wasn't about grand romantic gestures. It was about choosing each other every day in small but meaningful ways. They weren't just partners in life anymore. They were teammates, each supporting the other in their personal growth. One day, while sorting through old boxes in the attic, Linda found a stack of love letters Mark had written to her when they were young. "Mark," she called, waving the papers in her hand. "Do you remember these?" Mark laughed, a bit embarrassed. "I can't believe you kept those." Linda sat beside him, reading the words aloud, reminiscing about a time when love had been simple and full of unspoken promises. "You used to write me letters all the time," she said wistfully. "Maybe I should start again," Mark replied with a wink. The next morning, Linda found a handwritten note on the kitchen table. It wasn't long or poetic, just a simple message. "Every day with you is my favorite adventure. Love, Mark." Linda smiled, realizing that sometimes love didn't fade. It just needed to be reminded of its own presence. As they grew more comfortable with their evolving dynamic, Mark and Linda started discussing the future. Maybe we should buy a little place by the lake, Mark suggested one evening. Linda raised an eyebrow. You always said you weren't a fan of small-town life. I know, Mark admitted, but I think I just never gave myself the chance to slow down. Maybe it's time we create something new together. Just for us. Linda smiled. I like the sound of that. For years, their lives had revolved around raising children, working, and maintaining a home. Now, they had the freedom to dream again, not as individuals on separate paths, but as two people who had chosen to walk this journey together, no matter where it led. And so, Mark and Linda stepped into the next chapter of their marriage, not fearing change, but embracing it. Because, in the end, love wasn't about staying the same. It was about growing together, one new adventure at a time.